welcome to Spiritual Insurgency. I'm Jason Lupo, sitting here with my co-host Aaron Lujan.
What's up, dude?
And the war is raging on in Ukraine. Very interesting developments that have taken place. Aaron's got the lowdown, so I'm going to let him start with this conversation. But then I want to talk about Trump's response in the last couple days in regards to Crimea and in regards to Russia's relentless attack on Ukraine. It seems like Trump is almost like the preschool teacher on the playground, and Zelensky and Trump and Putin are like trying to make like their case to Trump. And Trump is like, just stop. I don't know. That's a very bad Trump impression, but you get the point.
Unbelievable. Look at this guy. So the Wall Street Journal has an article out today. Ukraine Zelensky pushes back on U.S. peace plan. Russia will never surrender Crimea, and Zelensky says he'll never agree to a peace deal. So this is an about face on yesterday's broadcast. I took us down memory lane and essentially reminded us that it was the Obama administration who conducted a color revolution in that country, overthrew their government, installed a puppet government. That puppet government, in turn, went and harassed and passed anti-Russian laws in the province of Crimea. And that region is predominantly ethnic Russian. They speak the Russian language. And so as this puppet government started to wreak havoc on the Crimean people, they exercised their constitutional right to secede to Russia and basically break away from Ukraine. And so Putin back then granted their wishes, went in to essentially honor the will of the Crimean people, and that was framed in Western media as Putin is an imperialist, he's an aggressor, and he's taking over the world, when historically Russia has never been an imperialistic nation. They've never been able to take down St. Petersburg or Moscow, but Russia has not been historically an aggressor. So anyways, it's interesting, fast forward to today. What's today's date?
It is April 24th.
April 24th. We are now in the interesting reality where Trump is now arguably giving Russia what they want, which is they want Crimea. It looks like Putin won this battle because now he's essentially there's a concession from the Trump side that you guys can have this. And so now I think the implications are going to be, how long will Zelensky be able to stand on his own as little Marco abandons talks with Kiev, and he's starting to become isolated on the global stage. So I think this is a good sign for the church because, we're to be advancing for peace, and it looks like, from the surface at least, peace is an opportunity.
This is a very interesting situation that's unfolding, especially when you look at America as this leader on the global stage and how America is responding. And I think when we look at how America is responding, I think that's a good indicator of where the globe is heading. And we say this on the back of another conflict breaking out between Pakistan and India, which we're going to get to in a second. But we see that global conflict is on the rise. I don't think that that's any new news to anybody. I mean, global conflict is escalating, and it's escalating quickly. But we look at America and what America's doing, and this America interventionism that we've seen on the global stage for so many years appears to be coming to a little bit of an end, where we're done with this era of the U.S. is going to involve itself in every conflict. I don't think that's what's going to happen in this Trump administration. I think that's what we've seen. On Wednesday, Trump took to Truth Social to slam Zelensky for making very harmful comments to the Washington Post over not legally recognizing Russia's occupation of Crimea. This statement, quote unquote, this statement is very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia in that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama, and is not even a part of, or not even a point of discussion, Trump wrote. That was written on Truth Social. He goes on today to Truth Social. Russia overnight. This is an article from NBC News. Alexander Smith. Russia overnight Thursday launched one of the most devastating bombardments on Ukraine's major cities since the war began, killing at least 8 people. Hours after President Donald Trump said he believed he had struck deals with both sides to end the war. After the attacks, Trump wrote, "Vladimir, stop," on his website Truth Social, referring to Russian President Vladimir Putin. "I am not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev. Not necessary and very bad timing," he said. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. Trump looking for peace. And I think that when you look for peace in this situation, Zelensky is going to have to realize that he is outmanned, he's outgunned. He does not have the support that I think Zelensky thought that he had in this battle, or at least other countries are going, "We're done with this. It's time to come to a peace agreement." And Zelensky does not want to concede any land at all to Russia, and does not want to concede Crimea to Russia. And so do I think that a peace deal is going to happen in the upcoming days? It does not appear so. It does not appear like that's what's going to happen. Zelensky taking to X, talking this morning on the current conflict. He posted, "It has been 44 days since Ukraine agreed to a full ceasefire and a halt to strikes. This was a proposal from the United States, and it has been 44 days of Russia continuing to kill our people and evading tough pressure and accountability for its actions. It is extremely important that everyone around the world sees and understands what is really happening. Nearly 70 missiles, including ballistic ones, and about 150 attack drones. Unfortunately, there is significant destruction. Rescue operations are ongoing, and the rubble of residential buildings is being cleared. As of this moment, over 80 people have been injured across Ukraine. Everyone is receiving the necessary assistance. Regrettably, 9 people have been killed in Kiev.
I don't know. We'll say whatever we want to say.
My condolences go out to their families and loved ones. There was a report from the military command. I instructed the Minister of Defense of Ukraine to immediately contact our partners regarding our request to strengthen air defenses. Today, I will brief President Ramaphosa of South Africa. I don't know how to pronounce half these names. Who currently hold the G20 presidency on the situation and our need to intensify global diplomatic efforts."
It sounded like Shannon Sharp for a second.
So Zelensky goes on air with Shapiro yesterday, has a interview with Shapiro. He's traveling around the globe. Zelensky is, I think, seeing himself as some like media sensation.
He's a gay backup dancer. I thought that was his LinkedIn background.
I thought he was like some comedy show, like what's it called? Like
America's Funniest Home
show,
Ukraine's Funniest Home Videos.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But either way, like you have Zelensky parading himself around the globe, trying to raise support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, his country is completely war torn, and Zelensky cares more about the media interviews. This is probably the most what's the right way of putting that? It's probably the most talked about war when it comes to leaders on social media spaces talking about the conflict. We have Zelensky all over X, Trump all over Truth Social. I mean, can you imagine if X was around during the time of the Civil War, during the time of the American Revolution? I mean, this is a war that's taken place that we're seeing social media have an influence on this war.
Yeah, well, I think wars today are going to also be information wars. I think most of the global conflict that takes place, one of the major components is the information war, because in any conflict, you are going to have to be concerned with the temperament of the people, because it's the temperament of the people and the will of the people that generally can end a war or start a war or allow a war to begin with. And since we're on the topic of, world leaders chiming in, and we're on this topic of information war, I think it's important to hear what Putin has to say as well, because I think what we want to bring on this show is a larger perspective, a wider lens to what we're actually discussing. And one of the things that's continually excluded from the Western coverage of these conflicts is Vladimir Putin and what he has to say, because we always make these blanket statements of, Vladimir Putin is a wild-eyed tyrant. He's a dictator, and he's bad and he's evil. But when you actually sit and listen to a Vladimir Putin speech, and he happens to be trending on Twitter today, I would argue, and I know Jason likes to call me a Russian apologist, and maybe that's true. But the reality is that I'm trying to be objective, and there's 5 points that I want to bring up really briefly about Vladimir Putin's speech in the context of Ukraine being in the news. Number one, his anti-Western rhetoric. He's accused the U.S. and the European Union of undermining stability through sanctions, military interventions, and what he calls neo-colonial policies. So Putin is basically taking the position that it's the West who's the one that's acting tyrannical. It's the West is the one that's infringing on the rights of innocent people, and they're the ones that are engaged in global empire. Number two, Ukraine justification. He's repeated claims that Kiev is a Nazi puppet regime. So he's reframing the bad guys as the Ukrainians, necessitating Russia's special military operations to protect ethnic Russians, essentially taking the position that we are on the defense, Ukraine is on the offense. And there's a lot to support Putin's claims in that regard. Thirdly, he's nuclear posturing. He's reminding us that they're, quote, fully prepared if sovereignty is threatened due to their nuclear arsenal. Fourth, he's boasted that Russia's economy has withstood sanctions due to their partnerships with China, India, and the global south. And I agree with Ron Paul that sanctions are acts of war, and we have been engaged in sanctions against the Russian state as far as I can remember, beginning with the Obama administration. And lastly, he's calling for patriotic solidarity, labeling dissent as treason fueled by Western sabotage.
This is just, it's such an interesting conflict from so many different perspectives. And yes, I have joked about Aaron being a Russian sympathizer.
I'm a Russian agent, ladies and gentlemen.
But I do believe that there is some legitimate concern across the globe about what's Russia's next plan after Ukraine. Does this conflict end in Ukraine? If Russia were to completely take over Ukraine, what's next? Is it Lithuania? Is it Poland? Like, where does Russia go after this? Is their plan to truly bring back the Soviet Union and to gain control of Europe? I know that Aaron has talked about, like, that's probably not Russia's plan, but I think that there's plenty of people that have a serious concern about what Russia does next. I mean, we've seen that they definitely can outman and outgun a country like Ukraine. And Zelensky's sitting there, I think, very upset that he has not gained the United Nations Charter.
Yeah, I don't see why anybody would be concerned about Russia expanding their borders or taking some sort of imperialistic stance. The reality is that Crimea voted according to their constitution to secede to Russia. So this was as simple as the Crimean people saying, Russia, take us back, and Russia granted their request. And the reality is that there are NATO bases backed up against the Russian border, which are in violation of a lot of the peace treaties that were established between the European Union, the United States, and Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. So I don't think there's any reason to be concerned about Russia being imperialistic. I think where we need to be concerned is, why is our federal government back here in the good old USA engaged in the foreign affairs of other countries? We should be minding our own business. We have a southern border crisis. We're on the brink of financial collapse. I think we need to mind our own business.
But I think that is a change that we're seeing. I mean, if you look at, just picture this for a second. Close your eyes if you have to. but this conflict with Bush in office, this conflict with Obama in office, like it, and also, I mean, go back to Israel, right? The Israel conflict with Bush in office, with Obama in office, with Clinton in office, with, I mean, insert former president name, and you would see boots on the ground. So this is probably the first presidency where we are not seeing global conflict met with American soldiers. And I think that's a very important comment and distinction to make, is that we are not seeing Trump rush to put boots on the ground in any of these places. In fact, he said, we're bringing them home, we're putting them on our southern border. And so I think from a diplomatic standpoint, Trump is handling this completely different than any former presidency and completely different than what Bush would have done. I can promise you that.
Yeah, well, I think it was under the Biden administration predominantly where we funded Ukraine, gave Zelensky billions of dollars.
100%.
Right. Through proxy, I think one could argue that previous administrations have funded this war, because it was U.S. military power that was being sent to Ukraine to fight Russians. I also think that's been alleged that there were Blackwater type, mercenary type groups in Ukraine, call them Western forces, that were coming alongside Ukrainian forces fighting the Russians as well. So I think if we're going to be honest, the U.S. has been involved either by proxy or indirectly through the funding of the war, through providing weaponry, that we have been engaged with Russia, for quite some time, at least going back to the Obama administration when we overthrew their government. I mean, the reality is that they had elected a government, and the United States went in and overthrew that government.
Yeah, and I don't know if Crimea is truly the only reason why Russia started this war. I don't think it is. I mean, I do believe that when you look at Ukraine as the breadbasket of Europe and the amount of just natural resources that they have, I do think that this war is definitely a territorial war, not just about Crimea.
Yeah, well, I think this is always.
I mean, but like, if this war, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but if this war was just about Crimea, then Russia would agree to just take Crimea and not the territory that they've conquered and that they presently occupy. And what Trump is saying is that for this war to end, you need to draw the lines where the war currently is and concede this land to Russia. So I do think it's more than just about Crimea.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. I just think Crimea is probably the one domino that's standing right now, and we're all fussing about this particular domino. But this row of dominoes has been going as far back to the fall of the Soviet Union. So the reality is that we are dealing with a Western imperialistic superpower that has been diametrically opposed to Russian sovereignty since the fall of the Soviet Union. They don't participate in the global central banking system. They're generally Orthodox Christian. They generally believe in two genders. They generally are friendly to the church. They do not allow their country to have open borders. They don't allow anybody to just walk in willy-nilly. I love saying that, willy-nilly. And the reality is that the United States started this conflict. They started it by overthrowing the Ukrainian government in a color revolution, and they installed a puppet government. They've violated all of the treaties with respect to NATO. I believe Russia has always been in a defensive position, and our corrupt, occupied Western media is hell-bent on lying to the world and the American people that Russia is somehow evil and they're somehow an aggressor, when we're the ones racking up bioweapons labs all along their borders. We're the ones that are attacking ethnic Russians in Crimea, and we're the ones that have been placing sanctions against Russia, which are acts of war. I think Russia's been minding their own business, and I think that we are sitting in an empire of lies, and this conflict is just another example of that.
It's intriguing, and I don't disagree with you on a lot of the points. I would say that when you look at the global stage at the present moment, and we do need to talk about this conflict that's taking place between India and Pakistan.
Absolutely.
And it's not just a cricket battle, even though those are some of the best cricket test matches there is.
Cricket is great.
I love cricket. It's one of my favorite sports. If you know me for a long time, like I truly love cricket.
This guy loves cricket.
And I will watch a test match, like from start to finish. That's how much I love cricket. I would sit there for 5 days and watch a test match, or at least have it going on. I'm not going to say I'm like tuned in for all, 30 hours of cricket.
I'll pray for you if you are.
But I do find it very entertaining. I think it's a great sport. We're so off track right now. What a rabbit hole. But when you look at the sanctions that some would call the tariff activity, I mean, Trump's tariff activity is completely separate than anything that's going on from a war perspective. It's truly about making the economic transactions fair for the United States citizens. And so when you look at Trump and his interactions with Russia and Ukraine at the present moment, I would say that Trump truly is looking for peace. I think that Trump truly is trying to find a resolution to the end of this war. And whether or not Ukraine wants to come to the table or if they want to continue to cry me a river.
Justin Timberlake, ladies and gentlemen.
About Crimea across the global stage all over the place, as some like media train and media excitement and this like sensationalism that Zelensky wants to have for himself. I'm not convinced that Zelensky wants this war to end.
He doesn't.
I said yesterday that I think that he's enjoying it. I think that he is enjoying the fact that his country is in this conflict. And meanwhile, Zelensky, he's not giving up power. He's basically created himself a dictatorship in the process. I just think we are being fed one side of a just crooked story. And it's not to say that I'm on Russia's side. I'm not on Ukraine's side. I'm not on any side here. I'm just looking at this from the perspective of we have a terrible leader of Ukraine that cares more about his own publicity and the sensationalism than he cares about protecting his people. And then you have Putin that's just adding to the mix because the more he attacks Ukraine, the more publicity Ukraine is getting, the more sensationalism we have, and the process goes on. And so I don't see this thing ending with a peace agreement by the end of this next 2 weeks.
Well, it looks like Zelensky's getting isolated. And if he's getting isolated on the global stage, and if Putin and Trump are in agreement, I think this could end pretty quickly. Just for that reason alone, I mean...
I don't know as though, Zelensky, from a lot of perspectives, is being isolated. But I don't think that he's isolated enough at this point that he is going to quit.
I mean, he may not quit, but it's going to end quickly if Daddy Trump and Daddy Putin, are kind of towering above him physically and, militarily and saying, we're done. Time to go home, time to pack up your bags, because the United States has been feeding Ukraine, Russia, is at their border beating the living hell out of them militarily. I don't think anybody could argue after looking at what's been taking place militarily that Ukraine has any way out of this. It's just, Trump is saying, stop, Putin, stop, like he's getting tickled by Vladimir. Like, stop, you're tickling me. It's just, that's what I thought of when I read that thing. So I think it's done. You want to talk Pakistan?
We need to talk Pakistan.
So violent clashes between supporters of a jailed ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan and security forces with reports of arrests, internet blackouts, and allegations of military interference in politics. Economic collapse. The rupee hit record lows amid hyperinflation, fuel shortages, and fears of a sovereign default with IMF bailout talks stalled over austerity demands. Terrorism has been surging with ISIS-K attacks, including the targeting of Chinese nationals and Taliban border tensions fueling security panic, and fallouts diplomatically, accusations of U.S. meddling after leaked cables suggested Washington pressured Khan's ouster in 2022. The reason should be front and center for the church and for us back home in America is that these are two nuclear superpowers. They sit kind of in between China and the Middle East. So geographically, this could be a powder keg. I don't think the United States, as the world superpower, can stomach another global conflict, especially when you consider what's happening with Israel and Iran, consider what's happening with Taiwan and China. So I think this is just going to be another weight, another liability for the U.S. To be dragged into another global conflict. India, I think, has 1 billion people. It's being considered one of the fastest growing economies in the world. They actually happen to have also one of the fastest growing churches. So I think we need to be paying attention to this. What can you say?
Well, as we talked about on Tuesday, India entering into a trade agreement with the United States. Basically, there is no more tariff from India on United States imported goods to their 1 billion people, and vice versa. We are not going to add tariffs for any of the Indian goods that come into this country. Whether that it was a push for additional support from the United States, now seeing this conflict that's on the rise, or whether that was a legitimate response to the tariff threat. I don't know in terms of what India's thought process was when they entered into that agreement. But I think we're going to see this global conflict continue to escalate all across the globe. I don't think that we're done here. And I think this is ushering in the years of peace that were promised in Revelations and in the end times. But that's a story for another day. I find that as these global conflicts are rising, the U.S. is trying to stay clear of it, and trying to basically be independent from all of this war. We have a Canadian election that's coming up in less than 5 days that will change the course of how Canada responds to these events as well. We saw some breakdown of the long-held agreement between between Canadians and the United States in regards to military action, which I think is probably more concerning than we would ever talk about on this show, or on most media. We'd talk about it on this show for sure. But it's just a very interesting time that we live in, and now we're fueled by social media as well, and this constant access to information that we may not have had in previous wars.
Yeah. Well, I just want to remind people that in Matthew chapter 24, verses 6 through 7, we are promised that Christ will return as those birth pains increase. And so the fact that we're starting to see global conflict rise, this should be a call to the church that he's coming soon. So we would be remiss if we did not discuss that. So I would also add that this is not just a natural battle, but it's a spiritual battle. As I was doing research for the show, I thought it was interesting that if you look at Pakistan, there's a lot of persecution of the church in that country. There is blasphemy laws, and there's also Islamic oppression, where the church in Pakistan is very much surrounded. And I don't think the U.S. is globally minded. The American church, I don't think tends to think about our brothers and sisters in countries like Pakistan, but God does. And so I think if it's on the heart of God, we here at the back in the U.S. of A. Should be praying for their leadership, should be praying for the church there.
Well, we have gone way over what we typically anticipate with this show.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important. I'm going to leave you with this thought process. Imagine if Osama bin Laden had an X account. I just want to throw that out there. Like, picture that for a second, because that's kind of what we're seeing on the global stage right now is all of these leaders of terrorist organizations and of countries blasting out commentary on the war as it happens. This is Spiritual Insurgency. Join us every day at 3 p.m. for who knows how long, but We'll be here every weekday, 3 p.m. YouTube, Rumble. Catch us there. Catch us tomorrow. God bless.
Peace. I was gonna say that Bin Laden's memes would have been super lit.
Okay.
So that was Daily Insurgency, and then we're moving to FM Springs, Salem.
Let's do. So, I believe that. Oh my gosh! So let me